pop quiz. A bell rings and you suddenly feel alert for class. Is that an unconditioned response? A conditioned response? A reflex? Or random? Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B, conditioned response. In this video, you'll learn what unconditioned and conditioned responses are, how they form in classical conditioning, and how to tell them apart in real examples. First, we have the unconditioned stimulus, or US, which naturally elicits the unconditioned response, UR. Then, there's the neutral stimulus, or NS, which, after being paired with the US, becomes the conditioned stimulus, CS. Finally, the CS elicits the conditioned response, or CR. For example, in Ivan Pavlov's setup, food is the US, and salivation is the UR. When a bell, the neutral stimulus, is repeatedly paired with food, the bell transforms into a conditioned stimulus. Eventually, the sound of the bell alone is enough to trigger salivation, which now becomes a conditioned response. The same idea applies in everyday life. At school, if the lunch bell consistently rings right before food is served, the bell itself becomes a conditioned stimulus. Feeling hungry at the sound of the bell alone is the conditioned response. A conditioned response is learned, but it's still automatic. You don't consciously decide to feel hungry when the bell rings. The reaction has been formed through association and now fires on its own. So far, we've defined the unconditioned stimulus and response, shown how a neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus, and explained that a conditioned response is learned yet automatic. These are the core building blocks of classical conditioning. Curious how much you're remembering? Your personalized practice test, flashcard set, and study guide are all waiting for you. Just tap the link now and keep watching. Future you will thank you. Now that we've covered the basics, let's apply classical conditioning to new situations. And watch out for some common mistakes. Consider this. After a frightening car crash, cues linked to the event, like that intersection, can become conditioned stimuli. Fearful reactions to those cues are conditioned responses. This shows how conditioning can shape emotional reactions. Another powerful example is taste aversion. Unlike most conditioning, it can form in just one pairing. If a certain food once made you sick, the flavor alone can later trigger nausea as a conditioned response, even from a single bad experience. Conditioning can also spread. This is called generalization, where similar cues trigger the conditioned response. But with discrimination training, the response narrows so that only one specific cue, the true conditioned stimulus, brings the reaction. What happens if the conditioned stimulus appears without the unconditioned stimulus? Over time, the conditioned response weakens. That's extinction. But after a pause, the response can briefly return. That's spontaneous recovery. A reminder that learning can fade but also resurface. Let's test it with a simple example. Imagine the smell of cookies. It's the unconditioned stimulus that naturally makes you salivate, the UR. Now, if a bell is paired with that smell, the bell becomes the conditioned stimulus. Salivating to the bell alone is the conditioned response. Learners often trip up here. Two common slips are mixing up the UR with the CR and forgetting to identify the US, the original cause of the natural reaction. Keeping these clear makes the whole process much easier to follow. So, to recap, unconditioned responses are natural reactions to a US. Through pairing, a neutral cue becomes a conditioned stimulus that elicits a learned conditioned response. These patterns explain everyday reactions, from hunger, triggered by a school bell, to fear tied to a past experience. Now that you've watched the video, let's see how much you remember. Head to the link in the description where you'll find Quizlet content made just for you.